I met someone who makes me feel alive. This is over. Those were the words my boyfriend of 6 years said to me during what was supposed to be our dream vacation in Greece. The trip where he was supposed to propose, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 32 years old, a senior software engineer at a fintech company in New York, and 6 months ago, I believed my life was stable in the way adults quietly hope for. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just solid. Ryan Caldwell was 30, worked in marketing, and for 6 years he had been the person I texted when something funny happened at work, the person who knew how I took my coffee without asking, the person who could read my silences without misinterpreting them. 6 years of shared passwords and shared groceries, of lazy Sunday mornings, and arguing about who forgot to replace the Brita filter, of planning for someday like it was a guaranteed destination. We weren't perfect, but we were consistent. And consistency, at 32, feels like love. We had talked about engagement for almost a year, not in the flashy, social media way, in the practical, spreadsheet way. Mortgage discussions, timeline conversations, the kind of talks where you calculate health insurance and school districts before you ever look at rings. Ryan had told me Greece would be special. I wasn't naive. I knew what that meant. He thought he was surprising me. He wasn't, but I let him believe he was. 8 months before the trip, I had quietly ordered something for him. Not a ring, not some grand public gesture. A custom vintage watch, restored and engraved on the back with 5 simple words. Santorini, the beginning of forever. It was subtle, masculine, meaningful. I imagined giving it to him after he proposed, watching his face soften when he realized I'd been ready too, ready for him, ready for us. The first 2 days in Greece were everything you'd expect from a travel magazine. Breakfast on our balcony overlooking the Aegean Sea. Water so blue it almost looked artificial. Sunlight reflecting off whitewashed buildings like the island itself was glowing from within. We walked through narrow streets lined with bougainvillea spilling violently pink over stone walls. We held hands on black sand beaches that burned the soles of our feet. We drank terrible €3 wine and laughed about how we'd lie to our friends and call it rustic. Ryan seemed happy, genuinely happy. He took photos of me with the sunset behind me and kissed my forehead like he always did. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the version of life you fight to protect. On the third day, something shifted. Not loudly. Just enough. He mentioned he wanted to try the morning yoga class at the resort. Ryan had never been a yoga guy. He complained about stretching before workouts. But I smiled. Go, I'll go for a run. The coastline that morning was quiet. Salt in the air, my lungs burning in a clean, satisfying way. I remember feeling grateful. Grateful that we had made it through 6 years without dramatic implosions. Grateful that love had matured into something calm. When I got back to the suite, he wasn't there. 2 hours later, he walked in, and I knew. There was no lipstick stain, no obvious guilt, but his energy had changed. He looked electric, like someone who had just stepped into cold water and hadn't stopped buzzing. How was yoga? I asked casually, toweling off my hair. Good, he said. Too quickly. Really good. He was smiling at his phone, not absent-minded scrolling, intent smiling. The kind you do when someone says something that lands directly in your chest. Who's got you grinning like that? I teased. Lena from work, he replied without missing a beat. Her boyfriend's being dramatic again. But when I glanced at the screen, the name wasn't Lena. And when he noticed my eyes flicker downward, he angled the phone away. It was small, it was subtle, but it was deliberate. I told myself I was imagining things, that pre-proposal nerves were making me paranoid, that after 6 years, I owed him trust. That night at dinner, he seemed distracted, laughing half a second too late, checking his phone under the table, his knee bouncing restlessly. The next morning, he said he was going back to yoga. He stayed even longer. When he returned, he smelled faintly of incense. And something else. Not perfume, just unfamiliar. We had reservations at a seafood restaurant I'd researched weeks earlier. Hand-painted tiles, cliffside view, owner known for singing to guests. I'd imagined that dinner as the beginning of the rest of our lives. He barely touched his food. You okay? I asked. Just tired, he said. The sun's draining. He didn't reach for my hand when I reached across the table. He didn't lean into me when I brushed my shoulder against his. That night, in our room, I tried to bridge the distance. Physical closeness had always been our reset button. He turned away. Headache, he muttered. Probably dehydrated. I lay awake in the dark, listening to his breathing. listening to the faint vibration of his phone on the nightstand. Each buzz felt like a hairline crack. By the fifth day, I wasn't competing with a person. I was competing with the feeling. And feelings don't respect history. They don't care about shared plans or engraved watches hidden in your suitcase. The night of the reservation, the one perched above the caldera with the panoramic sunset view, the one I had mentally bookmarked as the start of our engagement story. I dressed carefully, not flashy, just intentional. The watch was in my purse, heavy, waiting, when Ryan set down his wine glass with a sharp clink and said, "We need to talk." Something inside me tightened. Not loudly, not dramatically, but precisely. "We need to talk," he repeated. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. "Okay," I said, my voice sounded steady. He exhaled slowly. "I met someone." The words didn't explode, they sank. "Met someone? How?" I asked. "At the morning training sessions," he said. "The strength conditioning class by the cliffs." "Not yoga. Not stretching." He had called it yoga, so I wouldn't ask questions. "Her name is Isabella." "Not Lena from work. Isabella. She runs the sessions," he continued. "We started talking after class. It just happened." "Just happened." "With you," he said carefully, "I'm steady. We have history. We have plans." He paused. "But with her, I feel alive." Alive. As if I were the opposite. "I'm saying this is over," he added finally. "Clean, surgical. I'm staying with her for the rest of the week. She has a villa nearby." A villa. Of course she did. "You should stay," he said. "Enjoy the rest of the vacation. The hotel's already paid for." He reached for my hand. I pulled back. "Don't." He nodded once, stood, smoothed his shirt like he always did when nervous. "I'm sorry." And then he walked away. I watched him cross the stone floor of that cliffside restaurant, watched the sunset frame him in gold as he disappeared down the path. I didn't cry. Not there. I paid the bill, walked back to the suite alone. It still smelled like his cologne. I sat on the balcony overlooking the dark Aegean Sea and opened my purse. The watch caught the moonlight. Santorini, the beginning of forever. I stayed there for hours. At some point, I poured a small glass of whiskey from the room's minibar and left it untouched beside me. The sky shifted from indigo to pink. When I finally went back inside to get water, I noticed his suitcase was gone. He must have come back while I was in the bathroom and packed. Efficient. Cowardly. I checked my phone. 5:47 a.m. No sleep. Just clarity settling in. He had chosen intensity. He thought I would stay and unravel. He thought he would return to negotiation. He thought wrong. I booked the first business class flight from Athens to New York. Then I made a list. Change the locks. Call David. Separate all accounts. Remove him from everything. Ryan thought he was ending a relationship. What he had actually done was trigger a sequence. And I have always been very good at sequences. By early morning, I had checked out of the hotel. The front desk clerk offered a sympathetic smile when I mentioned a family emergency. I didn't elaborate. I didn't trust my voice to hold if I did. The taxi ride to the airport felt surreal. Santorini in the early light looked peaceful, almost tender. White buildings glowing softly. The sea calm and endless. The driver tried to make small talk. "Beautiful island, yes?" "Yes," I replied. It was. That was the problem. Beauty doesn't pause for devastation. At the airport, I moved like I was executing code. Efficient. Focused. No wasted motion. Boarding pass. Security. Lounge. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look for messages. If Ryan had texted, it didn't matter. He had already said everything that needed saying. On the plane, I stared at the seat in front of me and replayed his words. "With you, I'm steady. With her, I'm alive." The implication was clear. Steady meant predictable, familiar. Alive meant new, intense, risky. I wondered how long he'd been feeling numb. Had it started months ago? Years? Had I missed signs? Or had he simply mistaken stability for stagnation? By the time I landed back in New York late at night, I still hadn't slept. But I wasn't fragile. I was precise. The first call I made after leaving the airport wasn't to a friend. It was to a 24-hour locksmith. "I need my locks changed," I said, "tonight." There was a pause on the other end. "Ma'am, it's almost 3 a.m. I'll pay whatever the emergency rate is." He heard something in my tone and stopped asking questions. The locksmith arrived not long after, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a quiet professionalism. "Bad breakup?" he asked while kneeling by the door, drilling out the old lock. "Something like that," I replied. I stood there and watched metal shavings fall to the floor. Minutes later, he handed me 2 new keys. The old lock lay dismantled on the hallway mat. Ryan's keys, the ones he'd carried for years, were now useless pieces of metal. When the door clicked shut behind the locksmith, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Lighter. Temporary. I didn't go to bed. Instead, I grabbed garbage bags and storage boxes from the hall closet, and I started packing. Every item that belonged to him went into a box. Clothes from the bedroom closet, his suits, his gym sneakers, the navy sweater I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, his razor from the bathroom, his cologne, the framed photo of us at my cousin's wedding. I wrapped the photo carefully in newspaper before placing it inside, not because I was sentimental, because I didn't want to give him any ammunition. By morning, there were boxes stacked in the living room. By late morning, there were more than a dozen. I labeled them in black marker, block letters. Ryan Caldwell, box 1 of 15. I was meticulous, organized, calm. No smashing, no ripping, no theatrics. I even packed the blender his mother had given us when we moved in together. The apartment began to look like it had been edited, like someone had erased a layer. At noon, sunlight streamed across the hardwood floors and hit the empty side of the closet where his things had hung. It looked cleaner. That observation startled me. I checked my phone for the first time since the flight. Missed calls from an unknown international number. I didn't open the voicemails. Instead, I called David Harper. We'd been friends since college. He was now a real estate attorney with an office 15 blocks from my apartment. "David," I said when he picked up, "I need your help, and I need you not to ask too many questions yet." He went quiet. "Okay," he said. "What happened?" I explained it clinically. Greece, the conditioning coach, the breakup, the apartment. "The apartment is in my name," I added. "I covered most of the purchase. His name is nowhere on the deed." "Good," David replied immediately. "That simplifies things. I've changed the locks." Another pause. "You move fast." "I move correctly," I said. He almost laughed, but not quite. "Come to my office this afternoon. We'll draft formal notice revoking permission to enter, and we'll separate shared accounts." "Thank you." After hanging up, I stared at the stack of boxes. There was one call left to make: Ryan's parents. Michael and Susan Caldwell had always treated me like family. Holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners. Susan answered on the second ring. "Natalie, aren't you in Greece?" "Not anymore," I said. There was silence. I explained everything. I didn't editorialize, I didn't insult him, I didn't cry. When I finished, Susan was crying softly. "Oh, sweetheart, we had no idea." Michael got on the line. "What do you need from us?" he asked, voice steady but tight. "I have his belongings packed," I said. 15 boxes. I can put them in storage or I can bring them to you, but I can't keep them here." "Bring them," Michael said immediately. "You shouldn't have to handle this alone." That afternoon, after meeting David and signing preliminary paperwork, I rented a small van. Loading the boxes felt symbolic. Each one removed from my apartment was a subtraction. At his parents' house in New Jersey, Michael helped carry them inside. He looked older than I remembered. Susan hugged me at the door. "You're a good woman," she whispered. "He made a terrible mistake." I didn't respond. Mistake implied accident. This hadn't been an accident. By evening, I was back in my apartment. Empty. Mine. David had drafted the notice. It would be sent by email and certified mail to Ryan's legal mailing address. Ryan would no longer be authorized to enter the property. Shared bank accounts would be closed within the next business days. Utilities transferred solely into my name. Clean. Legal. Final. I stood in the center of the living room and did something I hadn't expected. I smiled, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I had refused to collapse. Ryan was probably still in Greece, probably posting cliffside photos, probably assuming I was home, crying. He had no idea that by the time his villa fantasy ended, there would be no apartment key waiting for him. No negotiation. No dramatic confrontation. Just consequences. I poured myself a glass of water, sat on the couch, my couch now, and allowed exhaustion to finally settle into my bones. I had been awake for nearly 40 hours, flown across the Atlantic, dismantled a 6-year relationship in less than a day. Tomorrow, I would block his number, change every password, erase every digital footprint. But that night, in the quiet, something unexpected surfaced. Relief. Whatever happened next, I had already chosen my dignity. And that was the first honest thing that had happened since sunset in Santorini. The next morning, I blocked his number. No ceremony, no hesitation, just a clean press of a button. I changed every password. Email, banking, streaming services, the shared grocery delivery account we used every Sunday. I removed his access to the utilities and transferred everything solely into my name. It was amazing how quickly 6 years could be reduced to administrative tasks. By the third day, David had sent the formal documents via email and certified mail. Revocation of property access. Closure of joint accounts. Legal language is brutally unemotional. It doesn't say you chose someone else in a cliffside restaurant. It says Party A and Party B are no longer authorized. I preferred it that way. Work helped. Code is predictable. Systems fail for reasons. If something breaks, you trace it, isolate it, patch it. Human beings are less cooperative. At night, the apartment echoed differently. Not sad, just quieter. I started going to the gym every morning. Not dramatically, not as revenge, just routine. Sweat clears static from your head. David recommended a therapist who specialized in sudden relational trauma. I booked an appointment for the following week. Not because I felt unstable, because I don't wait for fractures to widen. For several days, my phone was silent, which meant one of two things. Either he hadn't tried to contact me, or he had, and he couldn't get through. Then one day, my phone exploded. A flood of missed calls, unknown numbers, international codes. One New Jersey area code I recognized. Text notifications from numbers not saved in my phone. I didn't open a single one. I took screenshots, forwarded everything to David. He called me shortly after. "He's trying to reach you," David said unnecessarily. I gathered. "He says this is a misunderstanding." I almost smiled. "A misunderstanding?" That's his word. "And what exactly did he misunderstand?" I asked. "He claims it got out of hand. Says he made a mistake. Says he needs 5 minutes to explain." 5 minutes. 6 years reduced to 5 minutes. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That all communication goes through me." Good. There was a pause. "You okay?" David asked carefully. "I'm stable," I replied. That afternoon, my building's doorman called me at work. "Natalie, there's a man here saying his key isn't working. He says he lives with you." My pulse ticked once. "Steady." "His name is Ryan Caldwell," I said evenly. "He's not authorized to enter the building or my apartment." There was a brief silence on the line. "Understood. If he causes any disturbance, call the police." "Yes, ma'am." When I got home that evening, the doorman handed me an envelope. "He left this," he said quietly. The handwriting was familiar. Slanted, loopy, careful. I stood in the lobby for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Then I dropped it into the trash beside the mailboxes without opening it. Closure is a privilege. Consequences are not. Upstairs, the apartment felt untouched, unmoved, secure. An hour later, David called again. He showed up at my office, David said, unannounced. "And?" He looked shaken. I leaned back against the kitchen counter. "Did he?" "He says Isabella was a mistake, that it was intensity, not substance, that once he was there with her for a few days, it didn't feel the way he thought it would." "Interesting. What changed?" I asked. "He says the fantasy collapsed when reality showed up." I didn't respond. "Natalie," David continued carefully, "he's asking for a conversation. Just one." I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Cars passing, people moving, life unpaused. "No," I said. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He says he panicked, that he confused comfort with stagnation. I let out a slow breath. "He didn't panic," I replied. "He calculated. He just miscalculated the outcome." David was quiet. "I'll tell him communication remains through me," he said. "Please do." After hanging up, I stood in the middle of my living room. The same living room where we had assembled furniture together, where we'd argued about throw pillows, where he once told me he couldn't imagine life without me. He had imagined it. That was the point. He had imagined something brighter, something more alive. And now he was discovering that intensity fades faster than loyalty. 3 weeks passed. The certified mail receipt came back signed. Legally, everything was finalized. I changed my phone number. It felt symbolic, like sealing something airtight. I started going out again. Not recklessly, just dinners with friends. Movies. Normalcy. At work, a colleague named Daniel Brooks invited me to join a group for drinks after a product launch meeting. He was easy to talk to, observant, funny in a quiet way. He didn't pry. He didn't mention Ryan. He didn't treat me like something fragile. It was uncomplicated. 1 month after Greece, I was sitting at my favorite cafe near the apartment when I saw him. Ryan, walking down the sidewalk with his mother. He looked thinner, his shoulders slightly curved inward, like something heavy was hanging from them. His hair was longer than usual, unkempt. He saw me at the exact same moment. Our eyes met through the cafe window. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Hope, relief, then urgency. He started toward the entrance. I stood up calmly, left a $20 bill on the table, and walked out the back exit. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. Because when something is finished, you don't give it oxygen. You don't give it a stage. You let it end. For the first time since Santorini, I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not triumph. Freedom. 2 days later, David called again. "He's escalating," he said without preamble. "In what way?" "He's claiming emotional distress. Says you're being unreasonable, that you're overreacting." I let out a quiet breath. Overreacting to what, exactly? To what he calls a brief lapse in judgment. A brief lapse. 6 years. a public breakup, a relocation to another woman's villa, a lapse. Did he mention Isabella? I asked. Yes. And? He says it wasn't what he thought, that once the adrenaline wore off, he realized they had nothing in common. I absorbed that. So the fantasy ended, I said. Yes. He says he wants to come home. Home. The word no longer belonged to him. Tell him he doesn't live there, I replied. You're certain? David asked. Yes, because certainty is a muscle, and I had been strengthening mine daily. Later that week, details filtered in through overlapping social circles, the way stories always leak in New York. Isabella wasn't an anomaly. She was a pattern. Intense, short-lived relationships, particularly with guests at the resort. Men who arrived restless, men who left destabilized. Ryan had not been special. He had been predictable. Apparently, by day 6 in the villa, reality had crept in. No curated sunsets, no adrenaline, just conversation, logistics, personality. Intensity without foundation dissolves quickly. One evening, as I was leaving the gym, I saw him, standing across the street from my building, hands in his pockets, looking up at the windows like someone trying to remember which one used to be his. He saw me. Natalie, he said, stepping forward. I didn't slow down. You shouldn't be here. I just need 5 minutes. You already had 6 years. He flinched. I made a mistake, he said. I confused adrenaline with connection. That's not my problem. She wasn't real, he continued. It was atmosphere. I don't even recognize myself in that decision. You recognized yourself enough to choose it, I said. That landed. I panicked, he insisted. Everything felt mapped out. I thought maybe I was missing something. And now? Now I know I wasn't. The air between us felt neutral. Not explosive. Just finished. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. You unchose me. His jaw tightened. I was going to propose, he added. I know. He blinked. You knew? Yes. Silence stretched between us. I had something for you that night, I said evenly. Confusion crossed his face. But you don't get to know what it was. He stepped closer. Please, we can fix this. There it was. The expectation that history outweighs betrayal. That restaurant in Santorini, I said, was the last moment you had access to me. I didn't think you'd react like this. You thought I'd wait, I replied. You thought I'd let you experiment and come back. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It wasn't. He looked tired, not heartbroken, deflated. I don't hate you, I said. That surprised him. I just don't trust you. Trust doesn't shatter loudly. It fractures quietly. I hope you're happy, he said. I am. And I meant it. I walked past him, into my building, through the lobby, into the elevator. I didn't look back. 2 months after Santorini, the apartment no longer felt like an echo chamber. It felt like mine. The couch was positioned differently. The framed prints in the hallway rearranged. The closet organized. I hadn't redecorated. I had edited. Work was steady. I was leading a new product build. My brain was fully occupied by something that didn't involve emotional triage. Daniel and I started having lunch together more often. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't performative. It was easy. He listened. Actually listened. One night after a late release cycle, he walked me home. You okay? He asked casually. With what? With everything. I'm fine, I said honestly. He nodded, accepted that answer. That told me more than any grand gesture could. Meanwhile, Ryan's world grew smaller. Isabella had returned to Greece. The connection had lasted less than 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 6 years traded for 21 days. The math didn't anger me anymore. It clarified things. 3 months after Santorini, David called again. He's requesting mediation. For what? He claims emotional damage is tied to the separation. He says he needs closure. Closure. The word people use when they want relief from their own decisions. Tell him no, I said. He insists it's the only way he can move on. That's not my responsibility. 2 days later, he appeared outside my office building. Public place. Daylight. Natalie, please. You have 2 minutes. I've been in therapy, he began quickly. I felt like my life was predetermined. I confused that with suffocation. I waited. I thought passion meant unpredictability. I thought stability meant settling. And now? Now I realized stability was something we built, and I threw it away. That was the closest he had come to honesty. I need you to know it wasn't about you lacking something. It wasn't about me at all, I replied. He flinched. That's worse. I loved you, he said. I know. I still do. Regret is not repair. You don't miss me, I said evenly. You miss who you were with me. He stopped arguing, because he knew. With her, I felt amplified, he admitted quietly. You felt stimulated, I corrected. Silence. Is there really no way back? No. Trust, once fractured, never feels the same under your feet. He nodded slowly. I hope he treats you well, he said. He does. and I wasn't even sure what Daniel and I were yet. But I knew this. He treated me with presence, not intensity. Presence. Ryan stepped back, and this time he didn't follow. 4 months after Santorini, the word alive meant something different to me. It meant sleeping through the night. It meant laughter that didn't feel rehearsed. It meant walking into my apartment and knowing no one inside it had chosen me second. Daniel and I never had a dramatic declaration. There was no cliffside speech. There was consistency. He showed up when he said he would. He asked before holding my hand. He didn't disappear into intensity and reappear with apologies. One evening, while we were cooking, he looked at me and said, "You look lighter." He wasn't wrong. In the beginning, I had been composed. Now I was relaxed. Alive no longer meant chaos. It meant peace without fear. A few weeks later, I opened the drawer and took out the watch. Santorini, the beginning of forever. That sentence had once been meant for Ryan. Now it belonged to me. Santorini had been the beginning. Not of marriage, of boundaries, of discernment, of understanding the difference between a spark and a foundation. Sparks burn bright. Foundations endure. 6 months after Greece, I walked past the cafe where I had once seen him through the window. I felt nothing. Not anger. Not longing. Just distance. That night, as Daniel dropped me off at my apartment, he hesitated slightly. "Can I?" he asked. "Consent. Choice." I smiled. "Yes." The kiss wasn't explosive. It was warm, grounded, real. Later, lying in bed, I thought about that restaurant in Santorini. The sunset, the clink of his wine glass. I met someone who makes me feel alive. He had been right about one thing. That trip did make someone feel alive. Me, just not in the way he intended. Sometimes forever doesn't begin with a proposal. It begins with a boundary.